Incógnita do colégio. Você lembra falando assistindo porcaria, mas depois eu ridiculamente hoje. Questionável Webcam, 36, dia 2 do 7 de 2025, mas sei lá o que 5.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done.
Bom. Acho que pode estar melhor assim pra vocês. Mais altinho, sabe? Aqui.
He's gonna take you back to the past.
Oxi.
To play the shitty games that suck ass. He'd rather have a buffalo. Take a diarrhea dump in his ear. He'd rather eat the rotten asshole of a roadkill skunk and down it with beer. He's the angriest gamer you've ever heard. He's the angry Nintendo nerd. He's the angry Atari Sega nerd. He's the angry video game nerd.
I've been called upon to take care of business once again. Apparently, there is a game worse than Big Rigs. Worse than Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Worse than Crazy Bus or Desert Bus. It is known as Hong Kong 97, and I've been getting requests for it up the ass. The requests are so far up the ass, it's time to shit them out. The game was made for the Super Famicom in Japan, but never saw its way to the rest of the world. This is one title that we definitely didn't get on the Super Nintendo. It was made by Happysoft. Happysoft was most famous for making Hong Kong 97, their one and only masterpiece. On this one occasion, they rose from the depths of hell, excreted this unholy turd onto the earth, and then descended back to where they came. Supposedly, the game was so horrible, it barely even came out on the Super Famicom at all. Stores rejected it, and its release status is a mystery. It's so rare that to this day, not a single cartridge or physical copy has shown up at all. I can't even find a picture of one. So the only way I can experience this game is the same way as the rest of the internet. No way. How do you like that soundtrack? That won't get annoying at all. I've heard games with 5-second music loops before, but not with lyrics. There's options for 3 different languages. Strange considering how the game didn't travel very far, at least not until the internet got a hold of it. Alright, I'm picking English. We will sell your original SNES games. 1/3 of the gross profit will be yours. We welcome games of any kind. Oh, I bet. So please send us your floppy. Send us your floppy. Would you like to sell our products at your store? We're looking for dealers worldwide. Enough already. How desperate could they be to sell this game? And I guess still nobody bought it because nobody can find a physical copy. Then finally the title screen appears. Jackie Chan. Apparently Jackie Chan is in the game, who I doubt gave any consent to Happy Soft or was even aware of it. The image is stolen from the film Wheels on Meals. The game was released, made, or at least copyrighted in 1995, but set in the future of 1997. The year 1997 has arrived. A herd of... This can't be real. No, somebody's pulling my leg. A herd of fucking ugly reds? Was a herd of ugly reds too weak? Did they really need the F word to fucking drive home the fucking point? This was before cursing in games was common. I remember how shocked I was when I first played Rambo on NES and saw the word hell. But here, they dropped the F-bomb! They did it! A game made for the Super Famicom! It's the closest you'd ever get to a Super Nintendo game that says fuck. And the music is still going. A herd of fucking ugly reds, period, are rushing from the mainland. Crime rates skyrocketed. Hong Kong is ruined. Therefore, the Hong Kong government called Bruce Lee's relative, Chin. Bruce Lee's relative. Just happens to be as skilled as Bruce Lee. Not a brother, a son, or even a cousin. Just some unspecified relative. Doesn't make any sense. Like, if you were related to, I don't know, Michael Jordan, would that mean that you're automatically good at basketball? Okay, so Bruce Lee is in the background. The guy at the podium is Chris Patton, former governor of Hong Kong, and over there is Jackie Chan. Which one is Chin? For the Massacre of the Reds, Chin is a killer machine. That's Chin? It's Jackie Chan playing Bruce Lee's relative Chin. Oh, Chin. What a name. Could it be any more common? Oh, wipe out all 1.2 billion of the red... Stop. I can't do it anymore. I haven't even seen the game yet. Oh. Wipe out 1.2 billion. And if I'm not mistaken, in 1995, that would have been the entire population of China. Bruce Lee's relative is so powerful, he's the equivalent of 1,000 nukes. He's gonna murder the entire population of China by breaking their necks. Even when Bruce Lee would take down 20 people, it took him a little bit of time. But now comes Chin. You don't fuck with Chin. However, in mainland China, there was a secret project in progress. A project to transform the deceased Tang Xiaoping into an alternate... It's killing me. So apparently, for the character of Tang Xiaoping, they used an actual image of a real Chinese leader, Deng Xiaoping, spelled differently but pronounced very similar. When the game was made, this guy was still alive. Could they have at least had the courtesy to wait for him to die before transforming him into an ultimate weapon? This is the most epic, absurd opening to any video game I've ever seen. Nothing compares. That'd be like if I made a game called New York 2017. Motherfucking demons from the planet Jupiter have arrived through the Manhattan portal. The leader of United States calls upon Master Joe, John Wayne's half-cousin's stepson, to annihilate the 2.5 octodecillion alien scum of the universe. However, on Jupiter's secret moon, a master plan is conceived to resurrect the astro-demonoid Dill Clinton into a mecha doomsday machine. Now that I've digested all that, let's play the game. One hit and the game's over. Why would I expect anything more? No. Oh, please. I hope that's not a real dead body. No, there's no way they'd have such bad taste. That's got to be an actor. Or we're looking at some guy who died on that date and time in 1992. Oh, this couldn't get the Nintendo endorsement? I'm so shocked that this didn't come out on Super Nintendo. Every time you die, it resets the whole game. You have to go through the whole introduction again. This is almost as tedious as Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Great game, but you have to wait through a long, drawn-out game over screen just to get back to the title screen, select your file, and load the game all over again. That is some fucking bullshit. But this is a game that isn't even good. Not even close. And no, the song never stops. No sound effects either, just that same loop. Even when the game restarts, it doesn't interrupt it. The song never needs to reboot. It's quite impressive, actually. Nothing can stop that loop. You'll be hearing that in your dreams. So let's talk about what's happening here. Obviously, it's a 2D shooter. Nothing more to say. What you see is what you get. Chin's only method of attack is throwing projectiles, because if you're related to Bruce Lee, that means you can shoot white balls. This guy is so good, he does it all with his back turned. Everybody he hits, they don't just die, they burst into an atomic fucking explosion! And it's inside a square, like they just slapped a picture of a mushroom cloud on there. Why is the background Coca-Cola? Did they run out of ideas? Like, what should we put there? Anybody got any ideas? Anybody? Coca-Cola. All right. You know, there was a movie called Hong Kong 97. It came out in 94, 1 year before this game. That can't be a coincidence. So I'm going to consider this a movie-based game. Just so I can say it has nothing to do with the movie. In less than 5 minutes, the final boss appears, Tung Xiaoping, played by Deng Xiaoping, who has been transformed into a so-called ultimate weapon. What kind of ultimate weapon is that? He's just a head! After you kill him, the game continues and loops endlessly, so there's no real ending to the game. Unless maybe you kill 1.2 billion people without getting hit once, but who would ever try that? The strange thing is that Deng Xiaoping actually died in 1997. The game predicted the future. In fact, 1997 was the year the United Kingdom returned their rule of Hong Kong back to China. The movie from 94 forecast this in the tagline, 99 years of British rule are about to come to an end. Hong Kong will never be the same. The movie stars Robert Patrick, the T-1000 from Terminator 2, Judgment Day, and Judgment Day takes place in 1997. Part of Deng Xiaoping's ear is sort of cut off, like when Mike Tyson bit off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear in 1997. The car, I'm willing to bet, is a Mercedes-Benz in which Princess Diana died in 97. And what was the year Coca-Cola launched Surge? 97. And it's no coincidence all my Surge protectors were made in China. Rebooting the entire game after you die, just like Symphony of the Night, 97. Jackie Chan, Rumble in the Bronx, New York City, the Big Apple. The year Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 97. The unstoppable, unrelenting song is called I Love Beijing Tiananmen, also known as I Love Peking Tiananmen. Peking duck is a famous duck dish from Beijing. And Scrooge McDuck had his 50th anniversary in 97. The game was such a titanic failure. Titanic, the movie from 97. Why was this game sole purpose to direct us to the number 97? Like the NGC 97 galaxy in the constellation of Andromeda. The Princess Andromeda, who was chained naked to a rock to be sacrificed to a monster. Like Princess Leia and Jabba in Return of the Jedi. The special edition of Star Wars in 97. Oh, fuck, we're back again. Man, I was just trying to get a final answer here, but I went full circle. Like the song that keeps looping. A game that keeps repeating. Maybe it's all about a cycle. An endless cycle. Old shitty games that become new again. The past becomes the future. Birth and death. On and on. It's a cycle of life. The game is the meaning of life. And the thing that keeps life going. Reproduction. And food. Which becomes shit. The game is fucking shit there.
ever since man figured out written language, we've been finding more and more efficient ways of storing information on different types of media. In this episode, I'm going to be showing you a whole bunch of rare and bizarre media types. Now, I have a lot of them to cover, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on any one particular media, but I have separated up into 3 different categories. For example, I'm going to have a category on mechanical media, so this is media that requires something physically to touch and move in order to read the information.
Vinil.
And then, of course, I'm going to cover magnetic media, which, of course, works with magnets to read the information. And then I'll move into optical media, which uses lasers typically to read the media. Now, I won't really be talking about any modern flash memory or anything like that, but also because there are so many of these, I'm going to put a little bit of a table of contents down in the description field, so that if there's a particular type of media you want to look for, you can find out exactly what timestamp to go to see that kind of media. So, let's get started.
Aqui, ó.
We'll start with one of the oldest media types, an Edison cylinder. Now, while based on the original wax cylinder, this is a slightly newer design that's made of plastic and was probably made in the very early 1900s, which means it's still over 100 years old. These hold around 4 minutes of audio. The inside appears to be a thick cardboard or wood of some kind. And here's a closer look at the grooves. Oh, and the actual artist or song name was printed here on the edge, so you could read it if these were stacked on a shelf. Now, for something just a bit more modern, this is a long play microgroove record. Now, this was sort of revolutionary as it would hold over 20 minutes of decent sounding audio per side, and this came out in the 1940s. And here's something interesting for you. 3-channel stereophonic high fidelity by Motorola. I'm not quite sure how it works, but I think you need a special Motorola player to be able to use it. And I think this came out in the 1960s. And here's something from a little earlier. This is a Victrola record, but it's just single-sided, which is apparently somewhat rare. Notice that this one is just completely smooth and flat on the back. Apparently this made them prone to cracking, so later on they started stamping the Victor logo on the back of them. And this is just a pattern to make it stronger. Later on they started putting content on both sides of the disc. Next we have an Edison Diamond disc. Now, these came out around 1912 and were meant to compete with the Victor standard, but instead of the phonograph needle moving side to side, the diamond disc has the grooves designed so the needle moves up and down, much like in the cylinders. One really noticeable thing about these is they're very thick and kind of heavy as compared to other records in the era.
Mano, olha isso.
So what I have here is a 16-inch vinyl record. And just a
O padrão é 12.
comparison, here's a 12-inch.
Esse é o... Esse aqui é o que você geralmente encontra à venda. E isso aqui é uma abominação gigante.
Yeah. You see how much bigger they are. So you might ask, what on earth kind of player would you even play something like this in? Well, they were actually used by radio stations. A lot of the material was sent to radio stations to be played over the air on these big 16-inch vinyl records because they could hold a lot of audio. So, yeah, if you were listening to the radio back in like the 1930s or 40s, you might very well have been listening to the radio off of one of these. So the radio stations had their own proprietary players to play these discs. This particular one is apparently full of radio commercials for Winston cigarettes. And this one here is from the United Nations and is called Jungle Story. Flip it around to the back and there's something called Blood Brothers. And here's another sort of mechanical contact media. These are punch cards.
Se bobear é novela isso daí, rádio novela.
20s, before computers, as a way to control certain mechanical devices. But the widest use was certainly in early computer storage. But this was later replaced by punch tape. Now this is designed for binary storage with 9 bits of data, one for parity checking, and could come in large rolls to store larger computer programs. The smaller little holes down the middle were used for feeding and keeping track of which row of bits were being read. And since we're talking about computers now, this is the last mechanical media I'm going to show. This was a computer magazine, and it was printed in 1978. And it contains a lot of advertising and articles about computers of the era, mostly Apple II stuff. But what's interesting is when you get to the middle here, there's this little flexible record. This is called the Floppy ROM, and apparently it contains several Apple II programs written in BASIC. Now, this was designed to play in your record player, and you could connect it to the cassette input on the back of your Apple II and load it just like it was from a cassette. It looks like there are at least 7 different programs on this side, plus maybe 3 more on the back side. I've never actually tried this, but if enough people are interested, I might do a video on this product. But,
Vinil mole quadrado.
magnetic media. To get started, I have here an opened box of 8-inch floppy disks and 2 unusual boxes of 5
Eita.
1/4-inch floppy disks, which I'm going to unbox. I'll start with the 8-inch box here. Oh, I smell 1980s air in there. Heck, that might even be 1970s air. Anyway, so here are the large original floppy disks. Now, these are the same kind of disks that were used in the movie War Games. Now, let's open these 5 1/4-inch disks. I said they were unusual, but that's only partially true. These are 500K floppy disks. See, it says so right on the label. But these are also double-sided double density, which means they're actually just regular 360K floppy disks. They're just showing the raw, unformatted capacity on the label, which is an unusual and somewhat deceiving practice. So other than the label, there's nothing unusual about these. These disks, on the other hand, do have something different about them. These are called hard sector disks, but what makes them different? Well, they look exactly the same. In fact, looking at it next to the normal disks, there's nothing different to see, but the difference is somewhat hidden from view. So to show you what's different, I'll show you a dirty trick for removing the media from these without using any cutting tools. Of course, if you ever do this, don't expect the disc to ever read again. And now I'll pull out the hard sector media. Do you see the difference now? Yep, the regular disc has one hole for a single rotation, but the hard sector disc has a hole for each sector. So the drive is always aware of when a new sector begins. And although these look ordinary as well, these are a bit rare. These are quad density disks needed by some high capacity drives used back in the early 1980s, like the Commodore 8050 and others. Moving along, this is an Apple FileWare disk, sometimes called a Twiggy disk. These were used in the original Apple Lisa and were intended to be used in the Macintosh, but never were. Now notice it has 2 areas for reading the disk, and that's because the read heads were on opposite sides of the disk, with the foam pad on the opposite side from the read head. Other than the weird shape, these are similar in design to a 1.2 megabyte high-density floppy. In fact, it's possible to modify a 1.2 megabyte disk to work in a Twiggy drive. And as you can see, it's the same dimensions as a regular floppy. This is an IBM prototype called the Demi-Diskette. Now apparently it's read diagonally from the corner, which is weird. And just for size comparison, here's a regular 5 1/4-inch floppy disk. The final product actually has a hard shell like this, but it was never sold commercially. Here's an interesting one. This is a 3 1/4-inch flex diskette. Now what makes this interesting is it's like a hybrid of the 2 most popular disk types. It's in a flexible jacket like the older style disks, but it's smaller and uses a metal ring on the spindle like later style disks. And here it is compared to a regular floppy, and compared to a 3.5. These were originally designed to compete with the Sony 3.5-inch disc, but virtually nobody used them. Here's another little tiny disc. This was used in some proprietary Brother sewing and embroidery machines. This is a TEC floppy disk. Again, I have no idea what it goes to. This one is also read from the corner, and here it is compared to a normal disc. And here is an Amsoft CF2. These are hard plastic discs. They're really stiff. And they're a bit of an odd shape as they're sort of elongated. Here it is next to a 5 1/4. It's closer in size to a 3.5. And here's the write protect switch. And also the disc material looks metallic, which is weird. Moving along, this is an MCD cassette. Now, don't be fooled, this isn't a tape. It is a disc, even though it's really thick and heavy feeling. Here it is compared to a regular floppy. You can see how much thicker it is. And just in case you need proof that this is a disc and not a tape, I'll open the little door here. No idea what these were used for, though. Okay, so here's something really cool. These 2-inch discs were used to store single NTSC frames of video in an analog format. There are 50 tracks, and each track stores 1 field, so you could store 25 complete frames on each disc. Now, these were used in the original Sony Mavica camera, along with medical and industrial equipment as a means to capture single photos from endoscopes and other things. Here it is compared to a regular floppy. Here's a similar type floppy disk, but it's not compatible. It was only used by the Zenith Minisport laptop, and they could hold 793
Se não me engano, tem uma banda que gravou o álbum numa coisa dessas aí.
These discs never gained any market share. This one is called IT Media, and while you may be tempted to say it's 1.44 megabytes, It's actually missing the decimal point, so it's 144 megabytes, 100 times what a similar sized floppy would store. This was a failed competitor to the iOmega zip disk and the LS120 super floppy, which I don't consider either of these to be rare, but if I didn't show them, I'd get hounded with emails. So here you go. This is the LS120, which could store 120 megabytes per disk, and the drives were backwards compatible with floppies. Now, this was actually my favorite successor to the floppy drive, but actually never caught on that much. Here it is compared with a regular floppy, and of course the zip disk. This one is 250 megabytes.
Deixa eu até ver aqui. Aqui, ó. Teve umas que gravaram em disquete. Aqui. Toxic Chicken. Pronto, mano. Sasha Miller, Assistindo Monster em 2017, uma independente, uma DJ, ó. Toxic Chicken, grupo de música eletrônica da Hungria. I Hate Model, Lost Tapes, em 2016, música industrial. Playing for Bureau, que é rock eletrônico. Um álbum de lançado em 4 flop disks. E é um EP ainda. Bacana que existe. 8 teve um disco de demos em 2 disquetes. Ah, é Danger Music isso aqui. Mas de novo, um negócio. Aqui, ó. O negócio lançado em. Os bandos que lançam em disquete. Deixa eu ver aqui. Mesma coisa. Eles tiveram umas bandas que gravaram um álbum em disquete, tipo.
Other sizes. These had a few years of great success, but were killed off by a recordable CD. Here's another very hyped but failed disc format. This is the iOmega Click Disc, and these came out in the late 1990s and held 40 megabytes. Data. Now, they were intended for digital cameras and portable MP3 players, but with the price drop of flash memory, they couldn't compete by the time they came to market. They also made a little PCMCIA card for your laptop that was a tiny little drive that you could read and write to these like this. So, pretty neat, and I think that had flash media not become more affordable, these would have probably been a huge success. Okay, let's move on to tape media. This is one of those reel-to-reel computer tapes, like the ones you might have seen in war games. games. This format dates back to the 1950s, and believe it or not, they were still in use by some companies all the way up to around the year 2000. Now, you would have to load these into a very similar machine as would be used for reel-to-reel audio tapes or motion pictures, where they would spool onto another reel during use. And here's another brand, this one by 3M. This one opens up a little different. For this one, you lift here, and then the outer protective ring comes off. These probably took less room to store. Speaking of reels, I guess I need to show some audio reels, even though these aren't really that uncommon. There were many different sizes. If you want to know more about these, Techmoan has done numerous videos on the format. This particular one is a motion picture soundtrack to the movie Mondo Cane. And here's a smaller spool for home recording. Okay, let's have a look at some video cassettes. This type of cassette is known as U-matic, and it was used for broadcast material as it had a higher resolution than VHS. Now this one says IRS on it. I'm not sure if it's some kind of band or if it's some documentary about the Internal Revenue Service. Anyway, these tapes were used in TV stations to broadcast regular content. Now this one is even more interesting. It says A-Team Sales Presentation. So what this was essentially was a sales pitch of the TV show The A-Team, which was sent out to TV stations trying to get them to buy the show. Now, I'd love to get a U-matic player and have a look at what's on here, and maybe we'll do that in a future episode. Notice that the spindles don't look anything like VHS either, as there's no gear-like grooves. And here's some history for you. This appears to be a VHS version of The Shining. In fact, it even says VHS right here. But if you open it up, you'll find it's actually a Betamax tape. So during the decline of Betamax, they would reuse the same VHS cases to save money, but the shrink wrap would have a sticker on it saying it was Betamax. But yeah, this is an ordinary Betamax tape. Here it is compared to a VHS tape. But now I need to show you the king of cassettes.
So you remember that scene from the movie Crocodile Dundee? It goes something like this.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
So yeah, a good analogy for that would be for someone to hold up a cassette like this and say, I've got a cassette. Then you would say, well, that's not a cassette. This is a cassette. So yeah, this mammoth cassette comes in its own little suitcase carrying case. Let's open this thing up.
This is the Sony SD1 cassette. It's the biggest cassette I've ever seen. This thing
Caralho!
is huge.
Imagina uma banda lançar o álbum nisso.
Now that's what I call a cassette.
Other than it's called the Sony SD1, that's about all I know about it. I haven't been able to find much of any information as to what this giant cassette was actually used for, although I do know it stored digital information since it's written right on the cassette. Just for size comparison, here's a traditional audio cassette, and even a traditional video cassette is small by comparison. This appears to be the write protect option, but yeah, I don't know if this was for digital video or just data storage. This next cassette here is definitely meant for digital video. Now this cassette is still large, but not nearly as large as the last. One interesting thing is you can designate 4 or 8 channel by turning this little screw. Now I assume that's the number of audio channels. And here it is compared to a regular VHS cassette. These were used for storing high definition video back in the 1990s, probably in actual digital camcorders. Moving along, this one is a bit of an oddity. It's the Video 120 cassette from 1975. It has this little tag hanging here saying to remove shipping blocks before use. There are actually 2 independent spindles here that can be moved because the spools are actually on top of each other, presumably moving in opposite directions. Also, it inserts at this end, so that means you would load it in this direction. Anyway, this was a failed home video format, and here where it says do not open, well, I'll open it anyway. Yep, there's the tape. Here's something neat. This is an ADAT digital mastering audio cassette. It holds 42 minutes of audio, and if you think it looks like a VHS cassette, you aren't crazy. That's basically exactly what it is. It's for the Alesis ADAT 8-track audio recorder, which was designed to use VHS video cassettes, but some companies like Ampex made special high-quality cassettes marketed for use with these machines. And here it is next to a regular VHS. As you can see, it's identical. This is a movie on 8mm video cassette, which is a bit unusual because movies were never really distributed on 8mm format, which is unfortunate since it was a higher quality format and the tapes were definitely smaller than VHS. Unfortunately, in this case, I'm missing the actual cassette, but needless to say, it looks like an
Caralho, tamanho de uma fitinha
cassette
cassete.
and a Jones label on it. These were most likely sold to airlines as they used these cassettes for onboard movies throughout most of the 90s, since the tapes and players were much smaller and lighter than regular VCRs. I've shown you huge cassettes, now it's time to look at a really tiny one. This is a Datasonics cassette. These were actually digital backup tapes for use with computers.
Velho, pior que eu não gostaria que alguma banda tenha pego uma porra dessa e falado, vamos gravar um cassete, o álbum nisso.
This is a micro MV video cassette. These were used in some digital camcorders starting in 2001 and were continued in 2006 after being considered a market failure. These held 60 minutes of video stored in an MPEG-2 data stream. Since it's a video cassette, let's compare it with VHS. Although Mini DV is a better comparison as it was the real competition for this format. This is an 8mm data cassette. It looks identical to an 8mm video cassette, and it more or less is. The main difference is just the labeling and the intended use, which is for data backup storage. Now this one is far more interesting. This is another data cassette which stores 600 megabytes. Now it has a surprising weight to it, but you can see it's roughly the same shape as a traditional audio cassette, but I'm not entirely sure what these were used for. And this is a micro video cassette from 1980. Now you might say this is a predecessor to the 8mm video cassette as it was marketed towards the same goal, but never saw much use outside of Japan. And here it is next to an 8mm for size comparison. Here we have a DCC, or digital compact cassette. This has been covered a lot by Tecmone. This particular cassette is a blank cassette meant for home recording. This is one format I wish had gained more popularity, and maybe it would have.
Cara, isso é tipo disquete cassete, caralho.
It has a little protective sleeve here, but otherwise this is the same dimensions as a regular compact cassette. This was done so that players could be made backwards compatible with the analog cassettes of the time. As you can see, all the holes line up too. Moving backwards in time a bit, here's an 8-track cassette. Of course, 8-tracks aren't rare, so the only thing interesting about this particular tape is that it's a blank cassette meant to be recorded on. The vast majority of 8-track tapes were pre-recorded from the factory. Admittedly, the 8-track is an inherently bad design and one that I'm not sad to see go away. Here's something very similar to an 8-track. This tiny little thing is a special cassette used in some Sinclair microcomputers called a ZX microdrive. And the reason it's similar to an 8-track is because it's a continuous spool design that just keeps going around and around. These could hold about 85 kilobytes of data. And here's a similar technology that was tried on the market called a stringy floppy. And this one looks to be quite stringy indeed. One problem with this is because the tape is moved entirely by the capstan, there's no way to spool the tape back inside if it comes out like this. There aren't even any screws to take it apart. Anyway, probably best that these didn't succeed either. Of course, talking about magnetic formats, there are dozens of different home backup solutions that came out. And
Pedro.
because they were meant to be used for backup, interchangeability with other people wasn't that important, so this meant a lot of proprietary formats were created, and frankly, there are just too many to show, but I'll show a few of the interesting ones. This is an Iomega Ditto cartridge, which is tape-based. But this is a SideQuest cartridge, which is a hard disk platter inside. And this is kind of a weird one. It's a really long cartridge and it inserts into the machine like this. And here's one you might not have heard of before. It's the Iomega Rev disc. Now these came in neat little cartridges like this, and opening in here you can see it is also a hard disk platter of some sort inside. Of course, there are numerous professional backup devices as well, and some of these overlap with the consumer market, so there isn't always an obvious dividing line here. Now this is a DDS cassette, but what I find more interesting are the DLT and LTO tapes. Now they only have a single spool inside, which means the cartridges take up less space, and then when they're placed inside the machine, it will grab the end of the spool and attach it to another spool inside the machine. When it's done, it rewinds the spool back inside the cartridge and ejects it. I guess this classifies as optical media, right? This is an old film roll used in classrooms. This one is called Discovering the Library. The interesting thing is, you can see that this was used last in 1997, which surprises me. I was in elementary school during the early 1980s, the last time I saw a film projector used in a classroom. Nevertheless, let's open this up and have a look at it. So here's the leader, and you'd need to run this through the projector and then attach it to another spool to collect it. Now, it appears this film also has an audio track stored on it as well, which for me brings back memories of terrible sounding audio from a half blown out speaker in a brick classroom with a horrible echo, and thus, this is a format I really don't miss. And what we have here is something similar. This is an actual cartoon that was sold on film for consumers to buy and play on their own projectors. I'm not really sure what decade these were made in, though. I don't even think these have sound either. So, not entirely optical, I have a few magneto-optical discs to show first, starting with this, the MO disc. Now, these store 1.3 gigabytes per disc, and they're just about identical in size to a regular floppy disk. Of course, it might be best to compare with another magneto-optical format, the mini disc. So yeah, it's a little bit bigger than a mini disc, although it does hold more data. And here's another competitor to the floppy disk. This is known as the Floptical disk. And they hold 21 megabytes of data, and as you can see, they're identical in shape and size. And I think the drives were backwards compatible with regular floppies. Next up is the DataPlay disk. These tiny optical discs hold 500 megabytes, or 250 megabytes per side.
Então, tem bom que já gravou álbum nesse tipo de coisa também.
For those interested, this is another format I think deserved to succeed, but just didn't make it. Next up is the Sanyo ID photo disc. As you can see, it holds 730 megabytes. Of data. I think these were being aimed at digital cameras and the like, but never really caught on. They're basically just a tiny little compact disc in there, much like a DataPlay disc.
Okay, well, everyone's familiar with optical discs. I bet most of you have never seen optical discs this big. These are giant optical disc cartridges. This one holds 6.8 gigabytes, and I don't even know what kind of disc is in there. These are just a little bit smaller, and smaller is a relative term here. I think these might have been used for video. Some of these are possibly worm discs, as in write once, read many, that were used in archival storage. This looks like something that, yeah, was probably more likely used in like a data center of some kind. And this one here is actually still brand new in the box. So let's open this thing up. Now this is something else. I've never seen anything like this before. This is a Philips laser magnetic storage.
I've actually not been able to find out much of anything about this format. It has shutters on each side like this, and definitely looks like a 12-inch size disc in there, much like a laser disc. Maybe somebody could shed some light in the comments.
But this one I think is probably the most interesting. It actually comes with its own little carry case, and that's actually like really cool. Let's take a look at this thing.
I haven't been able to find out much about this either, other than it's a worm disc, so you can only write one time to it. Apparently it's a CAV, or constant angular velocity, so it has the same amount of data on the inner tracks as the outer. Now if you try to open this cover by hand, it won't budge, but if you grab this little slider on the side, it'll open up for us. And looking at these lines, we can definitely confirm that it is hard sectored and CAV, just as it said it was. They also have two write protect notches, one for each side, and they are pretty serious about making sure you don't move them by accident, since it requires poking something down in this hole to release the switch in either direction. And here's another that's kind of similar. This is also a write once media called LM4000. It also opens from the side, and you can actually move this one too. Okay, so here's one for you. This is a PD disc. PD stands for Phase Change Dual. It's a rewritable optical technology based on the regular compact disc dimensions and capacity. Introduced in 1995, they hold 650 megabytes. I used to use these a lot back in the day, and I guess I must have been the only one because I haven't met anyone else that used them. Now, I found them much more reliable than regular CDR. These are hard sectored, as you can see, and you can tell that they're CLV because there's more sectors on the outer part than on the inner part. Now they have a little notch up here you can move to write protect disk. And I also happen to have a PD drive here to show you. So this is just an ordinary sized optical drive that you would mount in a PC. Now this particular one is IDE interface, and when opened it has a little tray like this. And the cartridge fits down in here like so. Pretty simple. Of course, the drive was also designed to be able to read regular CD audio and CD-ROM discs as well, and they just fit right in there like so. Now, in case you're wondering what these little clips are for, I'll show you. If your optical drive was mounted on its side, or your computer were on its side, these clips were designed to help you load regular CDs without them falling out, like so. So that's PD media. Now, if you haven't heard of it before, you may have possibly heard of its successor called DVD-RAM, which came out in 1997. Now, this was also a type of phase change disc, but using higher density. The cartridges are almost identical, and in fact, most DVD-RAM drives were backwards compatible with PD media, so they could use either one. As you can see, the DVD-RAM is also hard-sectored. But one interesting thing, the cartridge says it's 5.2 gigabytes, but it doesn't work exactly like you might think. The cartridge is double-sided with a side A and side B, sort of reminiscent of old floppy disks in that regard. In fact, it has two write protect notches, one for each side. So really, each side of the cartridge has only 2.6 gigabytes, which is still a lot more than the PD media had. A competing format was NEC's MV disc, which was a market failure, but it also looks very similar and holds 5.2 gigabytes, but it is not compatible with DVD-RAM. Unfortunately, I don't know much about this format. Of course, I do need to mention that DVD-RAM did get an upgrade to these 9.4 gigabyte versions. Now, there's a few interesting things about these, same cartridge dimensions, and the drives that use these were also backwards compatible with the previous media as well, but they do have one unusual feature. The cartridges were designed to open up, if you just press in the right place. And the reason is because some other types of DVD drives were becoming compatible with DVD-RAM, but didn't use the cartridge. So this made the discs compatible between drives that did or did not use the cartridge. Of course, being that these were considered a professional format, keeping them in the cartridge was ideal for protecting them. Most of you are probably at least familiar with Laserdiscs. They came on these huge 12-inch discs the size of vinyl records. Now I find these interesting because these things actually record analog data on an optical disc. Now, Laserdiscs are generally two-sided, and the way they're made is by sandwiching two discs together with a layer of adhesive in the middle. Now each side holds about an hour of video, so 2 hours for a single disc. However, let me show you some more obscure Laserdisc types. So this is a music video single. Now, this is by no means one of my favorite artists, but I found this at a thrift store years ago, and I bought it because 8-inch Laserdiscs are so rare. So basically it's the same concept, just on a smaller disc, and it can hold about 20 minutes of video. And this particular version is single-sided, so it's the same thickness as a regular compact disc, so holding in your hand feels a lot like holding an oversized music CD. But here's something even more rare. This is called CD video, and the disc is a hybrid between a Laserdisc and a music CD. If you'll notice, there are 4 audio tracks on this that any regular CD player could play. But then track 5 is a music video, slightly under 3 minutes. The video portion is playable on a Laserdisc player. And if you look at the disc, you can actually see 2 different rings of data, because the analog video data looks different on the disc surface than the digital audio. Now, this was supposed to be how music singles would be released on Laserdisc, but for some reason the concept never took off, and these are really rare today. But then what I have here is even more obscure. This says CD video, but I'm not sure what makes it a CD video exactly, because it's on an 8-inch disc and is also double-sided. So it would never fit in a CD player of any kind, thus requiring a Laserdisc player. So I'm a little confused on why this isn't just called a Laserdisc. I'm sure somebody in the comments will explain. And of course you can't talk about Laserdisc without talking about RCA Selectivision. These aren't really optical discs, rather capacitive, and I think Tecmo did a good video explaining these. Of course, inside the cartridge, you find a dark-looking disc like this. Now this one has seen better days, of course. And then, of course, there's another type of video on disc. This one is called VHD. This format wasn't really ever sold in the USA, but had some success in Japan and Europe. It's also stored inside of a plastic cartridge, and again, I think Tecmo did a great video explaining about this format. So, moving along, I thought this was another video format for a kid's game console, but later on, I realized it was a game, not an actual video. Still, it's a great idea to put this inside of a cartridge, as you really can't expect kids to handle optical discs with the care they need to keep them from getting scratched up. Although, this one is somehow a little dirty anyway. Moving along, these discs actually really are a video format. These came out in 2003. The Video Now format uses a technology identical to the original compact disc to manufacture the discs, but the discs themselves are slightly smaller than regular CD or DVD. So for comparison, here's a regular old DVD, and you can see the Video Now disc is slightly smaller. Now these were actually meant to be played in these little kids' video players with a tiny screen on them like this. Now, these discs could hold a little over 20 minutes of low-quality video at 15 frames per second, but kids probably didn't care about the video quality, especially on a tiny screen. So, here's another weird format. This is called a DivX disc, and a lot of people confuse that with the video codec known as DivX, which is spelled the exact same way, but there's actually nothing at all related between the two things other than the name. It's the same physical structure as a DVD, but was encrypted differently. DivX discs were considered a rental format where you would buy the disc for a few dollars, but in order to play it, your DivX player would connect with a modem to an online service and then charge your account every time you play the disc. Now, this system was being pushed by Circuit City in the early days as a competitor to DVD. Some companies, such as LucasArts and Disney, were choosing to only release movies on this format in the early days. Fortunately, it was a market failure. Now here is another type of rental format. Now this was also a disc you would buy for a few bucks and take home. Now notice it has a caution label, do not open until ready to watch movie. And it says over here that the disc will discolor and become unplayable 48 hours after the vacuum seal is broken. And obviously this one is already discolored and unplayable. Now these were meant to be played and then thrown in the trash. Probably not great for the environment, but notice they call it a green disc and emphasize that it can be recycled. Yeah, right. I bet had these taken off, most would be in landfills. Probably another format we can be glad didn't succeed. And another type of DVD is, of course, HD DVD. Now, this was a competitor to Blu-ray that came out in 2006. I suspect most people have long forgotten about this. And I suppose one neat thing about this was they could be hybrid discs. So this one, for example, has the content in high definition on side A, but then flip it over and side B was a traditional DVD. So this format could have made a great successor to DVD since you could start buying the high def stuff before you even upgraded your player. Next up, I think this is some sort of religious thing, but what makes it an interesting format is that it's a hybrid. So notice on this side it says DVD, but if you flip it over, notice that it says CD over here. So you could play this as a video disc or a music CD depending upon which side you use. So that's pretty neat. And here's another sort of weird hybrid.